Hey y'all, how you doing? Good afternoon. This is Nate Tilton. Thank you all for joining us for the Graduate Diversity Admissions Fair and this plenary sessions on linking passion to research from a PhD student's perspective. And we'll be getting started in just a few minutes to give time for everyone to make it into the webinar. And thank you all again for joining us. We look forward to it. It's going to be a really awesome session. So just hang on for just a couple minutes. Thanks. And whenever y'all do get on campus, y'all can get one of these really nifty OSCE stickers as well. They sell them all over campus at different times of the year. So just giving a little OSCE plug, that Cal love right there. I also got the OSCE plushie too. I'm not going to say OSCE is the one that sold me on Cal, but OSCE definitely helped. So I got this at the Target near the Albany Village, which is the UC Village for those that y'all don't know. All right, so it's 12:05. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We've got quite a few participants from all over the world. Thank you for joining us today. Once again, my name is Nate Tilton. I am a PhD student in the Cultural Anthropology department. My pronouns are he, him, and I actually went to UC Berkeley as an undergrad. I transferred from a community college in the local Bay Area, and yeah, I'm just having a great time. I've been here for a couple of years now and just really enjoying my experience here at Berkeley. But quickly, as a reminder, live captioning is available and this session is being recorded. But pretty soon you'll get to meet Alyssa and you'll hear more about her story and her work. We'll have time at the end for some questions. So if you have any questions about pursuing research or transforming what you're passionate about into research, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen for the Zoom session. It may also, just to let y'all know, because there are quite a few of you, it may not be possible for us to get to all of your questions, but you can always reach out to the Office for Graduate Diversity at grad.diversity, DIVERSITY, at berkeley.edu, or any of our diversity and community fellows at their office hours location, which will be put into the chat. Like myself, I am a diversity and community fellow. I believe Alyssa is as well. And without further ado, let's get to Alyssa. Alyssa Gimenez. Her pronouns are she, her, and Sia. She is a second-year PhD student in the UC Berkeley Molecular and Cellular Biology program. That is a mouthful. In 2020, she received her Bachelor of Science in Community Health Sciences with a minor in gerontology from California State University, Long Beach. Go Dirtbags, right? It's an awesome school in Southern California as well. And her Master of Science in Molecular and Cellular Biology from San Francisco State University, Go Gators, in 2022. Her research interests broadly range from bridging global public health disparity research with cellular molecular biology to making strides in the field of astrobiology by identifying biomarkers for life on other planets. Currently, Alyssa is delving into the world of microbial life, receiving deeper training in molecular techniques in order to one day apply them to her wider goals of using biology to advance other fields. Specifically, she is studying the mechanisms behind how bacterial iron storage organelles, referred to as fursomes, I probably just totally butchered that, specifically sequester iron after periods of iron starvation, and how magnetonic bacteria prioritize which parts of the cell iron is supplemented to. Alyssa is a first-generation Filipina American. Alyssa aims to advance health equity, literacy, and academic opportunity in underrepresented Southeast Asian communities, both stateside and abroad. Her prior experiences in a number of STEM programs geared toward empowering scientists of color have motivated her to work hard to become a role model for underrepresented demographics who have historically been excluded from the sciences, especially the Filipino community, where she continues to serve as a mentor. Thank you, Alyssa, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nate. And thank you to the Office of the Graduate Division here at Berkeley for inviting me to speak to everyone today. So yeah, like Nate mentioned, my name is Alyssa Gimenez. I'm in my second year of the PhD program here in molecular and cell biology. So for folks who are interested in applying to this program in particular, MCB is quite a large department. My second year means that I've completed the first year of rotating in different labs to see which projects are most interesting to me. And then now in my second year, I've since joined a lab, and I'm now serving as a GSI in the fall, and then I'll be taking my qualifying exam in the spring to hopefully continue on in the program as a PhD candidate, as opposed to just a PhD student. And yeah, thank you so much for inviting me here again today. Yeah, if we can go on to the next slide, I can actually dive into the background of what I did in more deeper detail. All right, so just a quick background on me. I'm a first-generation Filipina American. My parents immigrated from the Philippines to the East Coast, actually, about in, I want to say, 1980s. My mom was actually completing her residency on the East Coast, and I was actually born in Providence, Rhode Island. But, you know, coming from a tropical climate, tropical area, they didn't really, my mom and my dad weren't really fans of the snow and the cold climates over there on the East Coast. So they moved to Davis, California, and that's where I grew up for pretty much all of my life. So I consider myself a Davis native at heart. For folks who aren't too familiar with Davis, it's the bicycle capital of the world. It's located in Yolo County. So I've heard a lot of jokes about both of those two facts. And I always consider myself to have been interested in science at a very young age. My parents always fostered how important it was for me to pursue getting an education, for me to pursue my interests in academia. And I always liked reading. I always liked the sciences. I really accredit my parents to encouraging me to taking those extra classes and those extracurriculars that would eventually build up my own academic profile to apply to the programs that Nate mentioned earlier. And actually, my high school was right next to UC Davis, which was maybe a 10 or 15-minute bike ride away. And I was quite privileged to have gotten my first scientific internship at the UC Davis College in their Department of Plant Pathology. So yeah, I was very lucky. I got this internship by attending a biotechnology class run by a teacher that I'm still close to. I still accredit her for giving me that opportunity, for which I'm very grateful. And, you know, taking those other baseline bio classes, such as, you know, your intro to biology or your AP bio classes. And it was this first experience in my junior to senior year of high school, in this plant pathology lab, that I began to shadow current students working on research related to, if I'm recalling this correctly, diseases that affect tomato plants. And during this internship, I learned the basics of just being in a lab. I had the opportunity to help crush up flash frozen tomato leaves. And so the students could sequence those leaves for tomato diseases. And even just that experience of learning how to freeze plants and then crushing them up, it really piqued my interest in working in a lab. So after high school, I went to Cal State University, Long Beach, and my bachelor's was actually in community health sciences with an emphasis or a minor in gerontology. But the funny thing is, I initially came into my bachelor's program in the degree of pre-nursing, because at the time I figured, oh, I really like biology, I really like science, but I didn't know if working in a lab would 100% be for me. And I figured, since I have a lot of family being Filipino who are in health-related careers such as nursing, it might be in my best interest to pursue this degree and then maybe hopefully apply biology as I go forward. But I found out after becoming an EMT and working in the emergency medicine field for a little bit, and also working as, or volunteering at the nearby Veterans Affairs Hospital, that I didn't quite enjoy having too much of a one-on-one interaction with patients. I actually found my bedside manner was quite atrocious, regrettably. And I figured, well, if I'm not really liking what is traditionally considered the priorities or the work of being a nurse, I should just go ahead and dive into, or try to dive into, conducting research. So it was in my junior to senior year of my bachelor's that I joined a bio lab on campus, working on this type of parasite found in humans and all sorts of mammals called Toxoplasma gondii. And the purpose of the lab that I was working in at the time was to see if a particular life stage of this parasite was able to survive outside of its host for longer than what the field originally considered it to survive for. So we took this parasite and we subjected it to a number of experiments where we would grow it inside of a host cell and then expose it to extracellular environments such as gastric acid or human blood serum, or even seawater. Because at this time, and because I was in Long Beach at the time, a lot of the research going on was related to marine biology. And there is an ongoing concern that runoff from the fields in LA containing this parasite would actually flow into the coastal waters of Southern California and expose sea otters and other mammals, other creatures along the coast of SoCal to this parasite. So with this research, we actually found that, yes, the parasite was able to live longer outside of a host cell for longer than what was considered. So while it brings up a generous amount of concern, through this research, we actually found out that there has to be some sort of intervention to be developed to help minimize the risk for this parasite for the creatures that are exposed on the coast of Southern California. And during my time in this lab, I really enjoyed the bench work especially. I enjoyed it much more than interacting with patients or volunteering at the hospital. So I'm very lucky to have gotten this research opportunity, and it was with a undergraduate research program called BUILD, Building Infrastructure Leading to Diversity in the Sciences, that got me this opportunity. And I worked with not just the director of the lab, our principal investigator, but also through the BUILD program, I met a whole bunch of other students who looked like me from underrepresented backgrounds, students of color, who were all trying to make it into this world of STEM where it's historically dominated by, white, cis, male presenting people. So during my undergrad, just building up this community really helped me a lot in that I could see myself in research, and figuring out that this was something I wanted to pursue going forward and really commit myself to. So while my bachelor's was more in the health sciences, public health field, what I got to work with my hands was this aspect of conducting biological research. And that really pushed me to apply at the time to both master's and PhD programs. I eventually, and this was through the help of the BUILD program, which was created so that it pushed students to this higher education of STEM. And so during my first round of applications to grad school, I didn't get into any PhD programs, unfortunately. It was quite a blow to my ego. But I did get accepted to the master's program in cellular and molecular biology at SF State, just across the bridge from where we are right now in Cal. And I honestly don't, a lot of people ask me like, oh, Alyssa, do you feel regret that you didn't get into PhD programs during your first round of applications? And if you asked me this question maybe 4 years ago when I first tried to apply, I would have said, yeah, because I thought I worked really hard during my bachelor's in this lab. I applied to and participated in the summer research programs and got even more on the bench experience working with this parasite. But when I actually went through the application process, and I did actually get invited to interview at UC Irvine, the same place where I did my summer research program, I learned about myself during these interviews that I didn't really know what I wanted to do for my PhD. And that's a very big question. That's something you have to kind of know the specifics about when you apply to these higher levels of research. So when I was accepted into my master's, it really gave me the extra 2 years to think about what I really wanted to do. And I ended up making so many more connections and so many more friends, and really learning an additional skill set of being on the bench in a biological lab. So during my master's, I worked with the Health Equity Research Lab run by Dr. Leti Marquez Magana. And a big part of my project was learning how to design and execute an entire project from the ground up. I really wanted to include my background in public health and working with communities. So when I told my principal investigator and the team at the time, like, oh, is there a disparity, and that this lab studies disparities in underrepresented communities, I told them like, hey, I'm a Filipino. I want to work with the Filipino community. Can we think of projects that would benefit folks who also identify as Filipino who live in the Bay Area? And miraculously and very extraordinarily, I was able to design a project called the Philippines Taking Action to Maximize and Amplify Nature Access, or the PAMANA project. And this was really to see if the interventions that myself and my team in the lab came up with could help mitigate stress for Filipinos living in the Bay Area, because at the time we were still going through the COVID pandemic and we could still see the effects very strongly in the community. So I did my master's from 2020 to 2022. And during this time, I actually got the chance to collaborate with Filipino community groups in San Francisco. No such project looking at specifically telomere length in Filipinos has ever been conducted. So this pilot project allows the integration of new information for this demographic in terms of health-related interventions, how to mitigate stress. And with this study, we actually saw that the application of nature interventions, so taking regular walks through nature, through green space, and even strengthening your ties to culture. My participants interacted with Filipino community centers in the Bay Area to achieve these goals. It actually helped a lot with mitigating or decreasing the rate of telomere attrition, meaning that, yes, Filipinos during this time went through a lot of stress, but walking through green space and having stronger cultural ties helped to lessen that stress. And saying it out loud, thinking about it, it really makes sense. This is something we kind of inherently know. But from a scientific or academic perspective, this data hadn't existed at all. So with this data, we can hopefully use this to support arguments in the future of having more green space in urban communities, having an emphasis on learning the cultural background of an underrepresented community, because that can be helpful and beneficial to health overall. So yeah, this master's project at SF State really showed me how I could integrate my training of public health and community health sciences with additional training that I received in molecular and cell biology, which was really, really cool. You can see in this picture on the right, this little yellow image. During my time at SF State, I actually started an infectious and emerging diseases club with 2 other Filipino students in my cohort. And we were really trying to make strides and looking to see if other students of color would be interested in this topic, because again, the COVID pandemic was going on. The 3 of us, we wanted to establish a journal club where we could talk about these things. And I had a really good opportunity to build a community with other underrepresented students in this way, through mentorship, just through journal clubs, through talking. So I would say that's one aspect of this quote unquote stepping stone, this in-between master's program between my bachelor's and PhD, where I was just building a stronger community network to eventually help me make it through to where I am today, getting into Berkeley. So after I graduated my master's in 2022, I'm now a student at UC Berkeley. I actually initially came into the program through the immunology division because my interests were in emerging and infectious diseases. I wanted this application in public health, combining it with molecular and cellular biology. But during my first year and participating in 4 rotations during this year, I really figured out for myself that switching fields from public health to bio, it was actually quite a big jump. So I needed more of training and more of a background on the microscopic level. So working now with bacteria and getting more experience working with bacteria. So that's why in the bottom right corner, you can see a picture, a very generic picture of, say, antifungal medication, because I wanted to enter that field of immunology, looking at understudied diseases, these fungal diseases. But now I really found myself enjoying working in the field of bacterial genetics, because it would give me, and I hope it gives me, a wider foundation of which I can build upon to then eventually loop back to applying what I've learned to public health and immunology in the future. And actually, if Sarah or Nate, if you could click the, oh yes, thank you. And what you see now is actually an image, a microscopic image of the bacteria that the lab I joined and I will work with. So this is a type of a species of bacteria that's actually magnetic. And what you see in the box kind of outlined out is this chain of magnetic crystal that the bacteria creates by taking in inorganic compounds such as iron from their environment. And they create these chains of magnetic crystal so that what we think is happening to better navigate the environment around them. So this process of taking in iron, taking in inorganic compounds to build these sorts of structures, we don't really know the genetic basis of. And I just think this whole topic is super cool. And so many applications are being thought of. And so we need to learn more about it. But yeah, so that's my kind of academic scientific background. But there's also more to me than just science, right? So the picture's kind of in the way, but my interests outside of the lab are always changing. I like to cook Filipino food. Oh yes, thank you. I like to take my pets on a walk. So there's my dog in the bottom left corner there, walking right next to my cat, who my wife and I trained to walk outside on a leash. And then that picture next to the pets is my wife and I when we went hiking to Mount Shasta together. So we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, and just overall, being here at Berkeley has been such a, I want to say such a trip, but that makes it seem as if I didn't have any influence on what I was doing. When I came to Berkeley, I had a lot of intent to like do things that were outside of my comfort zone, to learn new things. So I wanted to show folks this mini collage that I created where in the top left corner, that's me with one of the labs I rotated with. I actually was given the opportunity to go on a weekend-long field expedition to collect fungal samples in Central California. A lot of older adults and incarcerated populations are at higher risk of contracting this disease called valley fever, which is a fungal disease. So what this lab and I did at the time of my rotation was collect field samples since this fungi lives in the dirt, and that's how a lot of people get it. It was a really cool experience. We were in the Carrizo National Plains, and it was during a time called a super bloom where all the flowers were like in these bright blooming colors of yellow and red and purple, and it was really gorgeous while we were there. Yeah, what else? I am also a part of the Filipino graduate student group here on campus. So that's what that middle picture is. There's a whole bunch of us holding up a Filipino flag and smiling really wide because there is a lot of community here at UC Berkeley, as long as you make the effort to find it, which I really appreciate. And then kind of in between my field expedition and Filipino pictures, that's actually a setup here of the gassing station that I use on my bacteria, because these bacteria are anaerobic, but us, the scientists, need oxygen to breathe. So how do we make a proper environment for this bacteria to survive and so that we can work with it? So this is me taking a picture of the gassing rig that we use to make our samples not aerobic, but anaerobic. And it was really, I wanted to take a picture of it because it seemed so steampunky, and it was a new technique to learn at the time. And I wanted to show you guys because every day I'm just learning more and more on campus and in my lab. And then of course, I love my pets so much. So I wanted to include more pictures of my pets. So my wife and I, we always try to take our dog. There's a picture of her in the upper right corner to the beach because the beach is her favorite place. It helps all of us relax after a hard week of work. So that's her smiling right there. And then we also have a second cat in addition to the first one on the previous slide. And that's just her taking up the dog bed because she likes to bully the dog a little bit, but she looks so cute sleeping there. So I wanted to show you guys. But yeah, that's me. Feel free to contact me at any point with your questions. I have my contact information there on the bottom right. And yeah, feel free to ask me any questions that you may have about the program or just being at Berkeley. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, for all that. And we have, a couple questions for you. Brianna had some questions as well in the chat. And I think this was a very good question to ask. If Brianna says, if I have a wide range of research interests, like you did before you began your PhD, how do I synthesize my interests in my grad application?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for the question, Brianna. This is a really good one. So you'll find that when you apply and when you are accepted and enroll into a PhD program, you'll find that you're not the only one who has a wide range of research interests. And what you will learn when talking to these different people is that what we write about in our grad apps is not just the specific topics we like, but what are our goals in the broader term? Like, how can we use our interests right now to make strides in the field in the future? So I think if you have this idea of one, having a very broad range of what you want to apply your science towards, that's a really good start, because then you can pick out specific examples from your past research experiences that tie into this broader theme of, for example, I want to combine public health with cellular and molecular biology. What can I do? What have I done already, because we're applying to grad school, to meet this end? So for example, I learned about immunology in parasitic infections, right? That was from my bachelor's. In my master's, I actually worked with the Filipino community, with community members and stakeholders and groups. And then now in my PhD, I have the opportunity to collaborate with the public health and the cell molecular communities here to hopefully create a project that encompasses all of these interests. So I think it's more of not synthesizing your interests, but finding a thread that ties it all together.
Awesome. I'd like to add on to that as well. For those of you that are thinking, how do you narrow it down? I know I faced that same question, like many of us do, when we applied to PhD programs. And, I found it best to think about it in terms of, like, an undergrad, you learn to be a generalist, right? Like you may have a broad range of knowledge, but you're still a generalist in your field. As a master's student, you start to kind of narrow it down, and it starts to become more of a narrow field. But then as a PhD student, or later on as a candidate, it becomes very specific. Like, for instance, for myself, when I started out in undergrad, I knew I liked anthropologies. So I became an anthropologist as an undergrad. As a master's student, I knew I wanted to study something about medical and disability in anthropology. So my discipline was medical anthropology, or excuse me, anthropology with a medical anthropology focus. And then as a PhD student, it becomes now, like, my overall research focus is the way in which institutions disable people through understanding through the social means, or through the social model of disability. And that's how you kind of like start to get more narrow and more specific. But it's also good too to think in terms of what you want to do for this part of your academic journey. And I say that because something that you might like may be really cool, but it may not fit in your research scope now. But it doesn't mean you couldn't do it later on in your academic career. So it's one of those things, because sometimes it's also thinking about your project in terms of, like, not only relevance, but thinking in terms of, can you do it, right? And the more broader it is, the more difficult it is, especially doing a PhD. So for instance, a lot of my research focus is in Guam, right? In the US territory of Guam. Part of my other research focus is in Hawaii and in the Philippines. And so for me, I have to take those all at different steps at a time. For my PhD, I'm solely focusing mostly on Guam, because I don't have the capacity, nor will my advisors advise me to have so many different field sites all at the same time. So it becomes a lot of narrowing and kind of like really honing in and focusing. And that's what I feel, at least in the social sciences, a lot of times the potential advisors are looking for. They're looking for somebody who, like, knows what they want to do, but then also it's kind of counterintuitive, because at the same time they'll tell you it's okay to change your focus, which is okay too. And I saw a question earlier asking if that adds more time. It can add more time depending on how far into your study you are. In my experience, in a lot of my PhD classes, my grad school classes, I was always advised that whatever I do, whatever I write a paper on, should always go towards something that I'm working towards, right? Like something that could become an article, something that could become a book chapter, something that could go towards my dissertation. And I'm not going to say by switching your topic, you defeat that purpose, but by switching your topic, it does hinder it in a way that you have to maybe start over a little bit, but it's not frowned upon to start over. It's a pretty regular thing to change your focus. Alyssa, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you've been saying, Nate. And just to kind of piggyback on your answer and maybe even answer some of the questions here in the chat. So yeah, I've found that changing fields, like even now from public health, community health to bio, or parasites to more bacteria, having this shift in specialization has always been encouraged. Like, of course, it's going to be a little bit of an extra work because you are doing something you haven't had experience in before. But there is quite a supportive community of professors and staff here at UC Berkeley that have helped me get a better foundation and feel like I'm better prepared to tackle a new field. So I've actually felt that UC Berkeley's grad community has allowed me to explore these various topics. And when I first came into the program, or even when I was applying, I did have this mindset of, yeah, I had to specialize early on, or else they won't see that I'm committed to conducting research here. But that's not necessarily true. I think the expectations for applicants coming into this program is mainly looking for, can you explain the past research you've done in a way that lays out your logic and your timeline? But then also, can this person narrate why they enjoy doing the science that they did? And how does this past research experience tie into what they want to do in the future? So while you have to be specific when you're talking about your past research and what you learned from it, there's little emphasis on looking for students who know exactly what they want to do for their program, because the next 5-6 years in a grad program, there's something that's always going to change. Like, in addition to a lot of people who are in grad programs going through very drastic or very shifting life stages, and that's from the personal side of things, so will your research change. So yeah, I think hopefully that answered a couple of questions that people had. Should we just keep going down the list to answer them, Nate?
Yeah, sure. I was answering a couple just via the text. Oh, Nathaniel Foley asked if you can pass out your email address again, if you wouldn't mind, or if someone could pop that in the chat.
Oh yeah.
And then also, how do you balance? And I think this is a really important thing. And I think you did talk about this a little bit, Alyssa, but how do you balance your research? I'm going to actually add on this. How do you balance your research, your school life and your work life with your social life, right? Because like you said, you have a family, you have animals, and obviously you try to take time out to take care of yourself. But what do you do? Like, how do you, like, is there anything you implement to make sure you maybe get to the beach on the weekends, or get out for a hike, or is there any way that you pull yourself away specifically from your work to make sure that you get away and just take time for yourself? Because as we know, PhD programs can be pretty intensive.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think for every student you ask, the answer is going to be very different, because some people like to apply all their time and effort into being in lab, and then some people like to have like a very distinct boundary between the two. And for it, whatever works for you, like, go and do it. But for me, what I really like to do is at the beginning of every year or every semester, or I was a graduate student instructor this semester. So at the very beginning of class, I really established these hard line boundaries that I don't want my students or my advisors even to cross. So I come in and I consider doing a PhD as more of a job, right? Even though my official title is student. So I'll do my best to come in at 9 a.m. and leave at 5. Or if I come in earlier at 7 or 8, then I'll try to leave at 3 or 4 and then adjust the time so that I have like a regular 8-hour workday. And so that's what I do. I think on the weekends, sometimes I'll do some extra work if I feel like I've been behind during the week. But for myself, I try to just implement this hard stopping point of no one talk to me about work after 5, or no one talk to me about work during the weekend. But like sometimes those lines can blur, but I do my best to adhere to my own boundaries. And it's really helped a lot in that even my students respect it. Or if a professor from one of my classes emails me at 1 a.m. on a Saturday night, I won't let myself answer it. And I think a big part of this is making the work that you do during this 9 to 5 really count. So I try not to procrastinate too much when I'm on the clock. I'll take an hour for lunch, but then when I come back into lab, then I'm back like doing work or typing, or doing something to progress my day so that when I come home, I don't have to worry about work so much or if I'm behind or anything like that.
Thank you, Alyssa. And yeah, just to add on to that, I for me, my research is my passion, and some people may accuse me of doing me search on it, but I really enjoy it. It's one of those things for me. Like I actually have to pull myself away from it because I will get really into the weeds. I'll get into a bunch of books that I feel could be useful for me, or I'll read certain articles that I feel can be useful. And so, yeah, oftentimes I have to force myself to back away from that. And my service dog is really helpful with that. Her name is Starlin. You'll may see her in the photo. That's her right there. And we'll go over here to Point Isabel, which is a gigantic dog park for those of you who are thinking about coming to Cal and have dogs or want to have a dog. There's a gigantic dog park here that's just like looks right across from the Golden Gate Bridge. It has a beautiful view. It's called Point Isabel. So if y'all ever get a chance to check that out when you decide to come to Cal, I'd highly recommend it. But that's a part of my relaxation is I like to go during the sunset. I take my service dog out there for a walk. We go for a nice walk around because it's kind of like I guess like a little like peninsula a little bit that juts out. And we go out, we have a nice walk, we come back. And by then, I'm a little bit more calm, low key, and I'm ready to kind of like wind down my day. I also try to go and I try to work out. There's a lot of different workout programs at our RSF, which is, I believe, a recreational sports facility on campus that offer many workout classes. So you don't have to take like a PE class or like anything for credits. You can just take, yoga, or you could take Pilates or a body pump class, or they have several martial arts as well if that's what you're into. And then, like as Alyssa said, there's plenty of clubs on campus and other organizations. Honestly, I think the thing is what makes Cal difficult is the amount of things to do, because it's really easy to get caught up in everything that's available on campus. That's just, and then it's easy to run out of energy, and then all of a sudden you're in midterms and you have papers due and you're like, what just happened? And I think that's where a lot of students, undergrad and grad, have difficulties at sometimes. So sometimes it comes down to the executive functioning and just really managing your time. And going back to me search, Alyssa, I'd like to really hear your thoughts on that, because that's something I've butted some heads with some folks about this before, where it's just like, hey, it's me search. It's still valid research, but it's where my passion gets behind. And so, and I'm just curious your thoughts on this and what advice you may have for students who may be accused of me search, and when it's their passion and their research are linked to the lived experiences.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I think thank you for asking this question, Nate. And I think it's controversial because this is my opinion on it, of course. And this concept of me search, I really think it's controversial because the people who are being accused of doing me search already, most of us come from underrepresented backgrounds or the fields that we're trying to apply new studies to, they haven't really been explored. And I think just personally, the reason for this is historically, science hasn't been conducted in populations of color. That's why a lot of these or LGBTQ communities, because historically, the science has only been applied to white male demographics. So this idea of me search, yeah, I support it. I support it wholeheartedly. I think the reason why that people may butt heads with other folks about it is because they don't understand that historically there has been a disadvantage to these communities that we're trying to help with or integrate research with. So even my past experience working with Filipino communities in San Francisco, I'm Filipino. I'm sure there are many people out there who would consider my entire master's degree me search. But I would argue in opposition to this term of me search, I would call it just being an insider researcher, because my lived experience, my cultural experiences as a Filipino American, I see it as supplementing and better supporting the science. A lot of research going on that tries to navigate underrepresented communities, they don't really have foresight or this idea of how to integrate these communities in a way that doesn't feel like we're just taking information and leaving. So being an insider researcher really helps bridge this gap between underrepresented fields and the sciences. And of course, like in the past, science has really taken advantage of people of color, of LGBTQ communities. So the fact that we have researchers today in these underrepresented fields, of course, we're going to want to help our communities. So I don't see it as me search. I see it as being an insider researcher to supplement both the field and bringing back this information to communities who were not able to access it at all in the past. So if you consider yourself a me searcher, like, yes, do it, go for it. We need more people in science doing work like that.
Thanks, Alyssa. And Sydney adds, do you hear me search a lot in California / research spaces? I'd never heard of it until now. And, Sydney, I didn't really hear about me search until until after I transferred from community college to Berkeley. But then I did hear it more regularly in different academic circles. So I think it's something that you can hear often. And oftentimes, unfortunately, it can be used as a negative, as Alyssa and I were explaining, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to really highlight this, because a lot of folks, from different intersectionalities who have a lot of research interests, or get accused of me search. Like I said, I've been accused of it. I'm a disabled vet. I work with disabled vets because I feel I want my work to influence the policies that involve disabled veterans. And so that's one of the reasons why I do it. But like Alyssa said, it's like insider research, I think is a better way to understand it. It's also due to academia's past and even its present at times of being an imperialist project, and the way in which we extract data from people, or we make them into data sets. But that's a whole nother issue. But yeah, and that's why it's so important to have insider research perspectives, because a lot of times it's just in my own experience, I feel it's definitely good to have that. And I notice, like, when I work with disabled vets, like I feel they open up a lot more to myself rather than people from outside the community. And I feel that's just one of those things that's really really helpful. Now we only have a couple minutes left. It's 12:53. We have to get off at 1, I believe, and so we only got a few minutes left. Alyssa, do you have any, let's take one more question and then we'll go to closing remarks.
Yeah, I actually think we can, like, answering Stelina's most recent question.
Yes.
It can, I think that's something I'd like to answer because it also ties into a question asked by Liliana. So Liliana asked, can you describe your system for applying to grad school the second time? And then Stelina asked, what are some ways in which one can make their application stand out? So, I mean, just tying into this central theme that I am seeing that we have of like how to make ourselves stand out and this idea of insider research. I think when you come into the grad application with an internal mission of, I want to make a difference in this community. I can use biology or whatever field that I am interested in as a tool to make change. I think that shows that you're not just here to have that basis of gaining information in biology. A lot of grad applications are asking you, what are you trying to do with this education that we're going to give to you, right? So I think taking a lot of time to think about your intrinsic motivations was definitely a big player in how I applied to grad school the second time. Because my first time, I just kind of applied like, oh yes, I'm interested in biology. This is what I've done. But in my second round of applications, I had the mindset more of, this is what I'm interested in. This is what I've done. But how can I use these experiences that I've achieved or that I've gone through as a tool to push the science further, as a tool to help communities that aren't represented in science? So hopefully having that specific interest in your own intrinsic application matters just a little bit more than what exactly you want to learn, because it shows that you have this ability to think ahead. And kind of going into the same vein, Liliana, to answer your question, I would say if you're trying to apply to grad school, think about these questions and your intrinsic motivation and gather all your materials 6 months to a year ahead of when the actual due date of the application is. I would say that was also a big factor in when I was applying to, because the first round, I only took 2 months to prepare my applications. But in my second round, I took almost a year to prepare everything and really think my answers through. So yeah, definitely, it's a, what's the word? You're investing in yourself. So you really have to take the time to think about it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Alyssa. And so we got 4 minutes left. Do you have any other closing thoughts or remarks or statements that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think overall, I've really enjoyed my time here at Berkeley. The community in my department, and then even my communities in the Filipino and the queer community here on campus have been so strong. Grad school can be quite an isolating place. So it really helps to have like your people back you up. Let's see. And I would say, I think I see a question here regarding like LGBT communities here at Cal. So I'll try to address that very quickly. But yeah, grad school can be quite an isolating space. I think in your first years, or even when you're thinking about applying to programs, you have to have an established idea of what your community will be before you come in. And I can only speak to my experiences as a queer person in Berkeley, SF State, and Long Beach, but I found it to be quite affirming. Like, people here at Cal, they enjoy hearing about your perspectives as a queer person. They're valued. If you can even apply it to your science and your research. You just have to find a way to integrate it or word your ideas in a way that it'll fit under the grant that your lab is working with. But you have so much opportunity here to do the research you want. And if you want to apply your identities, then that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, I would definitely say, in my experience here at Cal, there's a very, very strong queer community on campus, and like there's the LGBTQ plus center that's near the Hearst Annex. Now I can't speak for your specific discipline, anonymous attendee, because unfortunately I don't know what it is. But I know for myself in anthropology, I think in my cohort, more than half of my cohort were queer folks, out of 12 people. So 6 or 7 folks were, of the queer community. And that's really common here at Cal. So yeah, I would, if you're definitely thinking of a more safe space, especially as a queer person going into STEM, I definitely feel would be a good location for that. Yeah. And we're at 12:59, so I think we're at time now. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any other questions or thoughts, please feel free to reach out to us, or please feel free to follow the slide of contacting the Diversity and Community Fellows or reaching out to the Grad Div office. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, y'all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Great questions. Yeah, go Bears. Hope y'all come over.
Yeah, go Bears. Yeah. Yeah, and then y'all can get like a Oski pillow too. I don't know why it like blurs out Oski. It's like I turn Oski and it's like, maybe I don't know, maybe it's a copyright thing. I don't know. There you go. Okay. Yeah. So you get the Oski pillow yourself, because Oski's the one that really sold me on Cal. That's why I got a lot of Oski merch.
Oh yeah, definitely. Everyone thinks Oski is ugly, but I think he's just the cutest thing, like ugly cute.
Yeah, same here. I love Oski.
All right.